Hello, sir.
Hello, Ankit.
Sir, Telangana Chief Minister Mr. Revanth Reddy the other day, in a series of interviews and events, actually, he made a point that the state finances are not really doing well. He gave a few numbers saying the monthly revenue is about 18,000 crores, thereabout. His expenditure on salaries and pensions, and also on the loans that have been taken by the legacy loans, are about 13,000 crores, and he's left with 5,500 crores left for welfare schemes and also capital expenditure. But from the way that he was talking about the state finances, it felt as if the state is in a deep crisis. What do you have to say on that, sir?
First of all, I appreciate Mr. Revanth Reddy, the Chief Minister, for his candor. It's time that senior leaders at the state and national level spoke openly about the finances and mobilized public opinion. And that's what he's trying to do. He's being very honest instead of trying to conceal everything, pretending everything is okay. He's trying to say, here is the problem, these are the numbers, let's do something about it. It's a cry of despair and also a call for action by all the society. To that extent, I think we should welcome that. But to the extent that his party, he may not be individually responsible, has been a significant contributor to the problem is also something to be acknowledged.
Okay.
See, Telangana finances in 2014 were in a very robust and healthy manner. When the state was formed, Telangana had the highest surplus in India. The 14th Finance Commission estimated that the 5-year revenue surplus alone for Telangana in those days, not today's money, but money of that time, was 1,16,000 crores, the highest revenue surplus estimated. That state has now become zero revenue surplus and in fact in some ways revenue deficit state.
Right.
The debt burden in 2014 was only 20%, 18% of the GST. In 2014, debt burden was 19% of GST. The GDP at the time was very low compared to now. It was only 5,05,000 crore rupees. Today, GDP has grown to 16,47,000 crores. In a higher amount, more than 3 times increase of GDP, the debt ratio has now gone to 45%.
Right.
That means a debt of about 98,000 crores all put together, debt and guarantees. Today, that has become 7,53,000 crores.
Right.
So almost an 8-fold increase of the debt. And in terms of percentage of the GDP, it has increased almost 2.5 times. Now, this is nothing but irresponsible fiscal management. 20% expenditure is the norm. 20% debt GDP ratio is the norm. If you take the state's total production, GSDP, about 20% of that as being debt is the norm. Government of India, 40% is the norm, we all accept. Government of India, because of COVID, etc., reached 60% and 60 plus. But now, last 3-4 years, they've been very, very responsible. They have now brought it down to 55-56%. It's falling every year. Whereas Telangana has increased dramatically. Now, a very healthy state with a big city, the Hyderabad city, any state with a big city is very well endowed because most of the money, most of the wealth, most of the job creation is in cities. Cities derive enormous income to the governments. Expenditure by the governments and cities is very marginal. That's why when Andhra Pradesh was formed, what happened? Hyderabad city that was catering to the needs of all 23 districts of the combined Andhra Pradesh now had to take care of only 10 districts of Telangana. So once Hyderabad money, which is a surplus city, has gone to a much smaller entity with a big city in that, then Telangana became very rich overnight.
Right.
That benefit, in substantial measure, they lost because of the reckless fiscal management over the past 11 years or so. And that point is valid. But in this, everybody is guilty. Knowing full well the financial situation, whatever he has mentioned, I appreciate him. But before the election, we all knew that. There's nothing new here. We mentioned it from FTR Lok Satta, publicly. You can go back to the old records. And yet, they made 60,000 crores annual recurrent additional commitment over and above already enormous amount of welfare systems that are implemented in the state, and about 2,80,000 crores one-time additional commitment. 60,000 crores per annum, that means about 3 lakh crores in 5 years. One-time commitment like loan waiver, like Dalit Bandhu at 12 lakh rupees per person for each Dalit in Telangana, some productive program or something. Then some other schemes like, for instance, some scooters, I think, electric scooters for the girl students and things like that. They came together to about 2,81,000 crores. Now, why did they make such reckless and now, as it turns out, irresponsible commitments? Power at any cost. So good that the Chief Minister is raising this issue. We all should respond. There must be debate in the media, in the legislatures, and among the intelligentsia and the experts in the country, and we must figure out some solutions. But we also must exercise restraint. Political parties cannot say one thing before the election, another thing after the election.
So, but the Chief Minister to this point, he says that they did not know of the actual numbers. He mentioned that they knew, according to the information available, the debt was about 3.75 lakh crores, not like how they came up with the white paper immediately after the elections, and the white paper mentioned that the debt is totaling to about 7 lakh crores. So they said that we did not know this information, and all our manifesto the programs were on that debt. What do you have to say for that?
I don't want to pick a quarrel on that. But before the election, I remember publicly and repeatedly, FDR made this point in videos.
Right.
Exact numbers may be slightly in dispute because until CAG or somebody verifies them and gives us authentic data, or RBI comes up with a report, we may not have adequate data. But what was happening was reasonably well known by that time. Take, for instance, Kaleshwaram project.
Right.
Earlier called Chevelda Pranahita project. Not only was there excessive welfareism beyond your capacity, nothing wrong with welfare. Welfare is necessary in a poor country. But is that affordable or not? Or if you're spending on welfare and on salaries and pensions and interest payments from the revenues, not from the debt, at least that's somewhat better. Though it's still bad because you must actually save money. Like a good family, you must save money in your income and invest some of the money for the future. That is what a good family does. A good government should do that. At the very least, you must not borrow to spend today without creating assets. Now, welfare is necessary. But if welfare is at the cost of the future development, if there's no balance between welfare and economic growth and investment and infrastructure, then two things happen. One, the debt burden mounts without the repaying capacity. And two, with the debt, you have not created any assets, therefore income is not rising. So the burden is a double jeopardy. Debt itself is not a bad thing, provided debt is utilized for new investment and utilized prudently, not wastefully. So what happened is, much of the debt in most of the states is going towards current expenditure. It's not true with Telangana because of the Hyderabad city advantage. It's not true with Karnataka. But in many states that is happening. And B, in Telangana, even the capital expenditure that you incurred, on paper it is for the future investments to give you better incomes, better economic growth, better employment in the future. But they were reckless. They must pay cost-benefit analysis. Take Chevelda Pranahita Kaleshwaram project. I raised the voice 20 years ago, not today. Repeat, about 17, 18 years ago. In the assembly, on the floor of the assembly, dozens of times I publicly and repeatedly pleaded. I'm all for irrigation. My whole life is about pro-farmer approach, helping farmers in a variety of ways to enhance their incomes. As a public administrator, I created the largest irrigation by individual initiative, administrative initiative, without any new program or any big project, 2 lakh acres in one district. So I understand irrigation, I understand the value of water and agriculture and productivity. But in the name of Chevelda Pranahita first and later Kaleshwaram, they spent lakhs of rupees per acre. If the cost per acre per annum is 40,000 rupees, if the return for you incremental income added is only about 10,000 rupees, where is the money going? On paper it may be a development project, but it is a drain on the exchequer. Nobody bothered at the time, in the ruling party or in the opposition. Now everybody is complaining after the damage is done. That's no use. So at least you must learn lessons from this experience. One, borrowed money should not go towards current expenditure, for consumption expenditure. It must go towards investment for the future. Two, whatever you invest must actually result in tangible dividends to society. higher incomes, higher growth, a better infrastructure, better productivity. Without that, the so-called investment is nothing but it is hoodwinking the people. It is working only for certain corrupt elements to collect the commissions without really commensurate benefit to the people. So Telangana offers a lot of lessons.
So from 19% of GSDP to 45% of the GSDP right now.
When the GSDP rose more than threefold.
Right.
It's not a stable GSDP. So GSDP itself rose threefold, more than threefold. From 5,05,000 crores, it became 16,47,000 crores. It rose almost 3.5 times. And then there's an increase of 2.5 times. So multiply 3.5 by 2.5. That is the debt increase.
Right. So apart from Kaleshwaran, what resulted in this kind of a rapid increase in the debt for the state?
You take one or two examples. Telangana and sadly Andhra Pradesh, which is even a worse state because there is no Hyderabad city, not only have they increased this welfare to a dramatic level, but their generosity in dealing with other segments of society is unbounded.
Okay.
For instance, the salary increase offered was, I think, 42% when the state was formed. Around that time, a pay revision commission was there. The highest salary increase was given in these two states for the employees. I'm all for employees. But we all know we have overstaffing in many areas. And on top of overstaffing, they increased the staffing burden. In the current government, Mr. Revanth Reddy's government, one of the biggest advertisements they gave is, we appointed so many teachers. In a state where teacher-student ratio is 16 students to 1 teacher. In a state where there are thousands of schools, which only have about 10 or 15 kids. In a state where there are dozens of schools where there is not a single student. Teachers still exist. So you thought employment at a very high cost is a great benefit, but you are draining the exchequer. For instance, in the last few months, apparently some 6,000 or 7,000 employees retired. Government has to pay a lump sum of more than 5,000 crores to the employees. They don't have the money. They're postponing the liability. So employees cost enormous amount of money. If recklessly you increase employees without commensurate benefit to society, employment is not your private property. It's not a private issue. It is for public purpose. You hire people. You recruit people. Just to give one example. I told you capital projects what happened. I told you extreme profligacy in terms of, for instance, Dalita Bandhu means 10 lakh rupees per person. Nowhere in the world, the richest country on earth has not offered that kind of welfare. 10 lakh rupees per person for a capitalist. In that, of course, everybody knew 3 lakh rupees were the standard commissions to various persons. 7 lakh people went to some people. But unsustainable. There is no way at Indian level of economy, the per capita income is about, Telangana is probably about 2.7 lakhs or so. 4 times the per capita income, per capita, not to a family. Can you afford to give? Where from? Where is the money? That's why when I told you 2,80,000 crores is the liability, if they actually implement this Dalita Bandhu program, Congress party said 12 lakh rupees. If TRS gave 10 lakhs, we will make it 12 lakhs. So once you act like this, as if there is nothing like fiscal prudence, there's nothing like limitation of resources, there's nothing like cost-benefit analysis, there's nothing like, if I pay so much of salary, what are we as people of the state who are paying the taxes, what are we getting from that salary? There's nothing like that. Then obviously you're asking for a disaster. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Andhra Pradesh is even worse because Hyderabad is not there. Andhra Pradesh imitated the worst of Telangana without some of the better features of Telangana. At least in Telangana state, successive governments, whether TRS earlier after formation of Telangana or the current government, are trying to promote growth in Hyderabad. At least Hyderabad's growth momentum is continuing. And that's what is saving the state. Even in a crisis, without Hyderabad, Telangana would collapse. Andhra Pradesh doesn't have that benefit. There's no advantage of a big city, a greenfield city or a big city. But Andhra Pradesh incurred even more liabilities than Telangana, without thinking of tomorrow. When the salaries were raised by 42% or so in Telangana, AP raised to the same extent, without money, without capacity to pay. Andhra Pradesh debt GDP ratio now is nearly 60%. If you take the loans budgeted, off-budget loans, and pending bills which are not paid, unpaid bills. Together, unpaid bills alone constitute about 1.3 lakh crores. And Andhra Pradesh GSTP is roughly the same as Telangana, a little less than Telangana, without the advantage of Hyderabad, with much bigger population. Expenditure is much higher. I'll give you one example. Sometimes people think that welfare in all states is the same. They're saying freebies in this state, that state. No. Welfare is necessary. Let's not insult the poor people. They're not freebies. They are from the tax money to really help the people who are in distress if they're properly designed. Welfare is necessary for people on the margins of survival. But as I said before and repeatedly, welfare and economic growth and infrastructure building, they must be balanced. Let me give a couple of examples. Andhra Pradesh is probably at the most difficult phase in the whole country. There's no state which has as much financial difficulty as Andhra Pradesh. Because not only has welfare gone beyond reasonable bounds, extraordinary level of welfare, not only are salaries the most generous in India, and therefore the pensions, post-retirement liabilities of the government, all these are extraordinary benefits. On top of it, the 5 years of the earlier government, they somehow came up with an extremely dangerous philosophy that economic growth is for the powerful people. It's for the rich. Pettandarlu, the feudal lords. Growth is for the poor people because they are the ones who need better services, better jobs, better incomes. Economic growth is vital for the poor. The rich don't need growth. The rich need to merely protect their properties and their money. The poor need to enhance their incomes. The strange argument is advanced that we'll press a button, you get welfare every month. That's all that's required. Everything else people want, they're bad people. With that, what happened? Not only are you driving the state into a debt crisis, you are guaranteeing that there's no future enhancement of incomes. There's no income generation or wealth creation or growth momentum. So the double jeopardy meant that the state is in a deep crisis. Now 60% roughly the total liabilities or debts of GSTP. And yet the state's expenditure continues unchecked, as if there is no bottom, as if there's endless money supply. There's a Kamadhenu or Kalparuksha. Let me compare this with, let us say, Karnataka state. Maharashtra state. Maharashtra is a much richer state. Maharashtra has more than $550 billion GSTP, the highest GSTP in India. 46 lakh crores, as opposed to Andhra Pradesh 15 lakh crores, or 3 times GSTP. Maharashtra's debt GDP ratio is about 19 to 20%. 60% in Andhra Pradesh, 45% in Telangana. Maharashtra, 19 to 20%. That means on a 100 rupee income annually, your debt is 20 rupees. It is not the same as 45 rupees debt on a 100 rupee income, or 60 rupees debt on a 100 rupee income. Both are debts, but this debt is sustainable. This debt is impossible. And yet, take one measure, old age pensions. A large number of people get old age pensions, widow pensions, physically handicapped pensions. Government of India gives some small amount, the rest the state adds. Andhra Pradesh has been giving 4,000 rupees per old age pension. Physically handicapped, much more. Take old age pension, 4,000 rupees per month. You know what the old age pension in Maharashtra is? They were giving 1,000 rupees until about a year ago. Just before the election, they increased to 1,500 rupees to please the people to get the vote. During the election, they promised to make it 2,100 rupees. After the election, the budget, they said, look, we'll postpone that because too much of money is going to go away in the short-term welfare measures. We have to have enough money for the future development. So therefore, these two are not comparable. When you look at a distance, it appears as if both are freebies. No. One is very responsible fiscal management. The other is reckless fiscal, I cannot even use the word management, reckless fiscal profligacy. So we must have a measured appreciation of what is happening. Look at the big picture, how much they can afford, what share of the GDP or GSTP is going towards debt, is there an increasing or decreasing or stable, how much money is going towards investment, how much money is going towards infrastructure and productive activities, Unless you took it the totality, if you politicize everything, make it a party political, it will not work. Karnataka made similar promises, Congress party before coming to power. Karnataka was always fiscally very strong, as good as Maharashtra. But Karnataka got into difficulties. Better than Telangana, definitely, even now. Karnataka, now also the debt ratio is 27%. Better. But they could do better. So Karnataka can afford some degree of short-term welfare measures. Telangana offered much more than Karnataka. They went beyond Karnataka. I mentioned to you, 60,000 crores per annum additional expenditure, over and above already very high level of welfare system, 2,80,000 crores one-time expenditure in 5 years. Karnataka opted for much less. Even then, they are not as good as Maharashtra, and therefore they are 27%. They are finding some difficulty, but they can manage because Bangalore is there. But we owe it to ourselves and to our children. Like a family, a good family is one where when you have income, you save money from income and invest for the future. If you borrow, every rupee borrowed goes for a future investment, for an asset that grows, for an income that increases. Only a bad family borrows money to spend today and leave the debt burden to children. Similarly, a bad company does that. A bad government does it. A good government has an obligation to make sure that there is actually a surplus generated. That money and borrowed money goes towards building the wealth, creating wealth, generating employment, promoting growth so that the future is more secure for the children. Now we must decide what kind of a country we want, what kind of a state we want.
Sir, of late there's a trend emerging that these promises of direct cash transfers, they take prominence during the elections, during the campaigning of the elections. Some of all parties, it's become a competition. All parties, if the one party says I'll give you 1,500, the other party says I'll give you 2,000 and everything. But immediately after the election is over, some parties in some states come back to their senses and they try to work the finances and try to implement. So it is all tied to our election, the duration of elections. Why is it that during elections, party interests take over the national or the state interest?
Because power has become all important in India, Ankit. There is no, I have great respect for our society. I take great pride like everybody else in our traditions, our culture, our nation. We are a remarkable nation in many ways. But we also must recognize some of our serious failings. Power seems to be so important here. Many politicians and parties think death is preferable to not having power. I'm not exaggerating. We elevated the importance of a position of power to a level much higher than the nation's future, your own dignity, your integrity, and your children's future. Power at any cost, position at any cost. So before elections, they get a favor. Like an examination going student, a student who did not prepare well, he keeps on praying to God and saying, I hope I only could get questions from these chapters I studied, only the guest questions I did, only those. He keeps doing all that. He's desperate. Supposing you show him a stone and say, you pray to the stone, give 1,000 rupees, he will pass, he'll do that. Parties have become like that, irrational, reckless, in pursuit of power, desperate. Otherwise, most of the information is known to them before the election. There's nothing that is new in Telangana which has come out now, maybe the more accurate numbers. You knew, I knew what was happening in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Karnataka, and other states before the election. We made it public. There's nothing new. We're pretending as if we're discovering new, afresh. Because before election, nothing else matters. And people also have become hyper-partisan.
Okay.
My party, your party. I hate this party or I hate that party, and it doesn't matter what they do. They may destroy the state or the country, but my party should win, my caste should win, my candidate should win. So I don't merely blame the political parties. All of us, the people, the media also, this extreme polarization must give way to say an appreciation of the finances of the state or the country and the future. In the absence of that, this is inevitable. And I believe there is hope. You see, in order to create a level playing field, one is the parties must come together and build a consensus. And to that extent, what Mr. Revanth Reddy is saying, I appreciate. At least if senior leaders, chief ministers, prime minister, they all generate a debate, union cabinet ministers. And slowly, you gather both information, accurate information, and a sensible analysis, and a consensus. If they build, it will help us. But that alone is not sufficient. We also must build fiscal rules. We have Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. What is the idea? That the Political parties must not be burdened with this decision making. We must create a framework in which all parties, all states, and the union, they conform to certain norms uniformly. And there's independent monitoring. Now, similarly, for instance, if you have one simple rule, you can spend in whatever manner you like, but only your money, revenues, not borrowed money. Have some one simple rule. We make every country, every state, and the union government bound by that. You may not reach there overnight. Some states may have difficulty. But give a timeline, but mandatorily you have to do it. Otherwise, you'll not be allowed to borrow. Because the control is borrowing. Without borrowing, they can't run the government. So if borrowing is prevented, unless borrowed money only goes towards future asset building, then a lot of things will come under control. The constitutional makers provided the mechanism. Dr. Ambedkar and his colleagues were very wise. Sardar K.M. Munshi and Dr. Ambedkar argued very, very logically in the Constituent Assembly for the need for union government keeping track of the finances of the states. The financial stability of India is at the union level. The credit of India is decided by the union, not in each state. So we have constitutional instruments, but we must honestly and impartially, dispassionately and independently enforce those provisions. Create sensible rules under the constitutional provisions and enforce them. That's what we're working on. Now, if we don't do that, our growth is in jeopardy. We're all talking about China. China was remarkably lucky in two ways. One, they had extremely wise leadership without democratic compulsions. But wise leadership of Deng Xiaoping, which looked at the financial management, asset creation, infrastructure building, economic growth-oriented policies. Two, China was remarkably lucky because their growth coincided with the global hospitable climate, trade, open trade, no barriers, no tariffs. You come and sell if you produce better goods and cheaper goods. Whereas today you are seeing what's happening all over the world and in America. There are tariff barriers, global growth impulses decline, and we are imposing burden on ourselves by excessive politicization and therefore victory at any cost.
Right.
At the cost of defeat of the future. Operation success, patient debt. You get into positions of power, but the state is doomed. We have to wake up.
Right. So we'll keep discussing on these issues as time progresses. Thank you for your time today.